Good evening, and welcome to our series, War+Lovers, Making the Musical. This present television series, Making the Musical, is actually a companion program to my live stage show called War+Lovers=Why. The live stage show is a love story set during the Vietnam War. The live play is semi-autobiographical, based on my experiences as a young kid growing up in the 60s, and research I've done on the Vietnam War. So this present television series is all about the various machinations that go into developing an original Broadway play from the ground up. The title of tonight's episode is A Spoonful of Sugar. The movie Mary Poppins, the original one, was released in June of 1965. And at that time, I was a young man, 11 years old, going on 12. And the last thing that I wanted to do was go see a movie that was designed for 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds. So I actually never saw it in the theater. But I couldn't avoid how impactful it was with our popular culture and popular society at the time. Even a phrase like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, I have no idea what that actually means, if it means anything. Maybe it's abracadabra or something, but it was everywhere. So I had knew what that was. And also, sometimes, even if you didn't see the play or you didn't see the movie, you would still hear music from it. And a lot of when I was young, I would have music for Broadway plays that I never saw, but I knew the music. And movies, Lawrence of Arabia, Deer Heart, all these movies and plays and things that I was too young to see, but I could play some of those themes on the piano. And there was a song called A Spoonful of Sugar Helps the Medicine Go Down. And that title is very germane to the subject of tonight's episode because with the subject that I chose to write about, the Vietnam War, it was a very challenging subject to somehow make it palatable and make it entertaining so people would want to see the show. At what point did America become so divided? After World War II, we were all together, but then came Vietnam. Let me tell you a story about the time the people of Camelot began to fight among themselves. One piano, 2 lovers, 3 armies, 1 Vietnam. Vietnam is a challenging subject to write a story about because it's sort of known as the only war America ever lost. And we didn't win because we stopped trying, and neither of those statements are really very accurate. In fact, Vietnam is probably the least understood war in American history. So that's one reason a writer would like to tackle a subject like that. At the same time, you have to be careful that there might be a lot of people, even people from my age, from the 60s, that might just say, I've already had enough of that. I don't really want to hear about it. So my challenge is to find a way to find that spoonful of sugar where I can make my story, my play, entertaining. And I did not just sit down and choose, I'm going to write about the Vietnam War. I actually sort of backed into it. When I left my band, when I was in '95, I started writing screenplays. And when you write that first screenplay, you're so excited, you think you're going to sell it, and you don't worry about it. And then the second one, third. After I'd written 10, I said to myself, I have to get something produced, because a screenplay is not a finished product. A screenplay is something that is designed to be made into a movie. So you can't really do anything with it. You don't give your screenplay to an average person in a bookstore to read, because if it's a film student might read it, but the average person wants to see the movie. Now, if you want to finish the work yourself, you can write a novel and sell that and print it out and sell it yourself, but you can't really do that with a screenplay. So with a screenplay, it really is necessary at some point to get it produced. So when I did my 10th screenplay, I finished that right about 2002. And actually I worked on that for a couple of years. That was by far the longest one that I had worked on, and I thought that was one that I wanted to make into a movie. And I understand, I think most people understand, especially people that are trying to get a movie made, that if you want to get a movie made, you need to get a name attached. You need to get somebody who you can use to help you get funding for the movie, because they're very, very expensive to make. When I began to put my team together in order to get my movie made, everything started going really, really well. I went to the union, I got 3 names. What I wanted to do is what they did with the movie The Wrestler. Find an A-list actor who really hadn't done anything in about 20 years and offer him something as a comeback vehicle. And that's what they did with the wrestler Mickey Rourke. He hadn't done anything for a while, and he came back and did that. And he didn't make a lot of money from that movie, but it did relaunch his career. So that's what I wanted to do, and I was able to contact the agent for one of these stars that had been, really hadn't done anything in a long time, but everybody knew who he was. He was very, very high profile in the 80s, actually. And we had a wonderful talk, and finally it came to the point where, who do I know that you know? Who do we both, who can vouch for you? Who can I contact and say, is James an okay guy? And it could be anybody. It could be a friend. It could be a fellow associate. It could be maybe someone if we went to the same school or anything. But there just wasn't anyone, and I immediately realized that I wasn't going to be able to do it unless I knew somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody, which I didn't. It wasn't going to happen. So I started thinking, maybe an off-Broadway play would be a lot less to produce than a movie. Maybe I could do that. And all my screenplays are mostly written either in present day, or I have a couple of science fiction ones that are written in the future, but I'd never really written a historical drama like this is back in 2002. None of my previous screenplays had been in the past. So when I started thinking about doing a play, I thought, why don't I do a play on the backstory of my 10th screenplay? So when you're writing a drama, you're looking for conflict. So I went back and back and back, and I realized, oh my gosh, Vietnam was my war. And that might sound a little funny that I was surprised by it, but I came into Vietnam at the very last moment. I was born very, very late in the year, in 1953. And if I would have been born in January of 54, I would have been too young to be in the draft. So I was really weeks younger. I wouldn't have had any involvement in Vietnam at all. However, I did grow up during that time. So I did notice, even as a young person, I noticed things that were happening in society, although I wasn't actually participating. And so that's where I realized, I'm about a half generation behind the people that were really involved, the people at Chicago and the people at Kent State and all those people that were deeply involved in the war protests in 66 and 67 and 68. They were all 5, 6, 7, 8 years older than I was, so it's right at the end. So it wasn't really something I chose, it's just something I kind of backed into, because I realized my backstory takes me back there, because in all my stories I have someone my age that's kind of based on me. And so that was where I had to go back to the Vietnam War, even though it wasn't really something that I consciously chose in the beginning. One of the most challenging aspects for me for doing a story about Vietnam is I want to contribute something to the body of thought about that particular thing. In other words, what really happened and what did we do that was wrong? How did things kind of get going in the wrong direction? So what we're talking about is policy. And talking about policy, it can be really contentious, and it can be at times very, very political. And I don't see my story as being political, but it does deal a bit with policy, if only for maybe 5 minutes. So there is a reason that I chose to continue with the story, and it's because it's something that no one has ever really discussed policy in a movie about Vietnam, because it's kind of a dry subject and it sounds like politics, but policy and politics aren't necessarily exactly the same thing. In other words, there are a lot of words that are similar. Policy and police. Well, the police are the ones that enforce the policy. And then you have policy and politics. Well, the politicians are the ones that design policy, but not all the people involved in policy are actually politicians. And so, just for an example, if I say vote for Johnny Johnson, that's a political statement. If I say vote Republican or vote Democratic, those are political statements. But if I say vote for the best person, that's not a political statement, that's a philosophical statement. So what I try to do in my play is really take a philosophical approach where I'm not really trying to be judgmental, and I try to present both sides of the equation, but really try to maintain that distinction between politics and philosophy, because a lot of people don't like politics, and the reason we don't is there's no compromising. Like if we speak in terms of someone that we know who's a political person, what does that mean? It means their opinions are immutable, they're never going to change them, you know exactly what they're going to say before you even begin a conversation with them. That would be a political person. Whereas a more philosophical person would be someone who, if you made them a good argument, they'd be you'd have a better chance of getting through to them. So that's one of the things, I think the thing that most people dislike most about politics is this idea that it's just always push, push, push. I want my own way. I don't care about your attitude. I just want you to agree with my attitude. And I think that's the thing that people don't like about it. And I think one of the biggest challenges I have with this story is trying to avoid taking a political stance and just try to, the little short moment I do talk about policy, try and keep it on the philosophical side and away from politics. As I've mentioned before, I've been working on this particular play for now going over, working on it for 15 years, and I've been staging it off and on for about 10 years, so it's undergone many, many different permutations and changes. And the first draft I did, I was just coming from the world of screenwriting. And in screenwriting, you're not allowed to write long scenes. They really tell you, show, don't tell. You're not supposed to explain things. They don't really like you to use narrators, and it's really, those are kind of some of the things that I actually like. So you're trained, keep each side short and be very visual and action, show, don't tell, dramatize everything. Don't just have a talking head scene where, that's where that term comes from, talking heads, where you have two people that are just, all you see are those two people talking. You're supposed to avoid that. So when I did the first draft of my play, this was a chance to write some long scenes. Actually, in my first draft, I had one scene that was 38 pages long. And that would be about 35, 38 minutes of one scene of talking. And, so that had to be rewritten, and I was planning on rewriting it. But our first performance, I think I didn't put any songs in it. I just had short piano interludes, and it was 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that was, for the modern day writing, that's a little bit on the long side. So the version I'm doing now has songs in it, and it's only about 90 minutes long, about an hour and a half, and it's just now a one act, because I've discovered from working on my play over and over and over, today that's sort of what people like. The concentration isn't quite as long, and they want to get the story going, and the pace of the storytelling today is a little quicker. So today, even with songs and with piano interludes, it's only about 90 minutes, so a lot of dialogue has been cut out. And that's one of the things that I've done to try and make the entire show less of a labor to endure. But of course, simply doing that is not enough. I need to do more. I went to see the production of Miss Saigon at the Broadway Theater a few years ago, and to be honest, I didn't really like the opening, and the reason I didn't is because it made it look like war was a 9-to-5 job, and the soldiers went out on patrol 9 to 5, and then they came back at night and went to the brothels, and that's not really what war is like. So it did, in that world of that story, it kind of felt like that. And the idea of the guy falling in love with someone that he met, and I didn't really feel that was that strong of a story. So halfway through the first act, I didn't really enjoy it that much. And then came the dancing and the music, and I never realized how much dancing contributes to a live show. Because when you see dancing on TV, it's a little different. It's not the same impression. It's like listening to an acoustic, like someone playing solo violin or solo acoustic guitar or solo piano. It doesn't come across that well on the TV. But if you're there and you can feel the strings vibrate and you can see the artist close up, it's a completely different experience. And I'd seen other plays with dancing before, but because I was a little not that crazy about the storyline, for a few different reasons, having done so much research and there wasn't any dialogue in it, it was just what they call a sung-through musical. And for me, it just, what it didn't say could fill volumes. Like the Pentagon Papers, I don't think it had nothing that was in the Pentagon Papers was in that production. But the way the dancing uplifted that production was just amazing. And before that, by then was just getting ready to do my latest series of shows, which started about 3 years ago. And I decided, because I had all these piano compositions, and I just decided, hey, we'll have a dancer go ahead and dance during those piano compositions. And it just turned out to be a wonderful, lucky, fortunate decision, because every production we've done, everyone comes to me and say, we love the music with the dancing, and everyone says that. So even if they think it's more political or more this or more that than it really is, sometimes people don't quite get your message that well, especially when I'm doing it in a very small theater, and we can talk afterwards, and sometimes people will get up and they don't really get the idea that I'm trying to put across. But everyone seems to understand the music and the dancing, so that has been worked out wonderfully. So that is something that's I think a big part of my spoonful of sugar in this production, is that my original compositions, which are influenced by composers like Mussorgsky and Ravel and some of the expressionists and the impressionists. That's sort of the angle I'm coming from with the solo keyboard. And then the dancing with that, that's sort of my sugar to make the overall production to be as entertaining as possible.